Speaker, once again a vast area of our state has been lashed by wild weather. I'm advised heavy rain continues to be a risk around the Gold Coast and the Scenic Rim this morning. Multiple locations on the Gold Coast recorded more than 200 millimetres of rain since 9 a.m. yesterday. Talabudra received 347 millimetres, Burleigh Waters 296, South Stradbroke 293, Gold Coast Seaway 292, North Stradbroke Island 266, Coolangatta 232 and Binnaburra 120. Emergency alerts were issued for some of these areas. Mr Speaker, they have since been cancelled, but the warning remains to be alert for flash flooding. As of this morning, an emergency alert remained current for residents around Mile Creek at Dalby, where water has risen to 3.6 metres. This is below 2011 levels, but 4 houses have been inundated and the occupants taken to the Dalby Evacuation Centre. I'm advised another 2,000 homes may have had water through their yards. Mr Speaker, tragically, one person has lost his life. 4 schools are still closed, but many roads around south-east Queensland remain treacherous and some impassable. Mr Speaker, it saddens me that the message is still not getting through. If it's flooded, forget it. Swiftwater rescue crews responded to 14 calls for help in the past 24 hours. These teams risk their lives to save others and always will, but we owe it to them to minimise that risk by staying out of harm's way. The State Emergency Service has responded to 240 calls for help in the past 24 hours. That number is rising. I'm advised the rain system is moving south and evacuations have been ordered again in Lismore. Mr Speaker, coming so soon after devastating floods of late February, there would be many families who heard the heavy rain on their roof overnight and feared a repeat. I hope the federal government agrees to our request to help fund our resilience package that will provide comfort to those Queenslanders by making their homes more flood resilient, or in many cases buying them back, allowing them to rebuild their lives in a new home away from the risk of floods. Mr Speaker, I've always said that we work best when we work together. I will cooperate with anyone. I will work with anyone. But I will not let this state be shortchanged or taken for granted by anyone ever. Mr Speaker, I provide the Prime Minister with a list of priority projects that are vital for Queensland's future. The top of that list is flood resilience. Mr Speaker, I'm all for saving for a rainy day, but I urge the Prime Minister to look at Queensland. We've never seen so much rain. My government has provided emergency grants to 84,000 people following the February floods. Those are 84,000 Queenslanders in the most desperate need. Many of those would have had heard the rain last night and thought not again. I welcome the federal government's support in providing the disaster relief it has, but the package we have asked for would provide a permanent relief to many of these families. Mr Speaker, our $771 million resilience package is essential, it is necessary and it deserves to be funded here in Queensland. Our share, $350 million, is already on the table. It is in addition to the $279.25 million already spent. A matching contribution of $350 million from the federal government in tonight's budget is not a lot, especially compared with the billions announced in the past few days. Mr Speaker, Queenslanders pay their taxes, and I'm asking for some of this to come back to Queensland. Along with every other state government, we are asking for a 50% contribution from the federal government to help meet the health and hospital needs of our growing population. This is also backed in by the AMA. President Dr Chris Perry said this week the funding increase would stop a shortage of hospital beds. Mr Speaker, we are doing our share, building 3 new hospitals and 7 satellite hospitals, adding 1,056 beds by 2026. And Mr Speaker, we are doing this by not cutting doctors, not cutting nurses. Mr Speaker, we value our frontline health services.
Order.
Member for Nanango, next week the Minister and I are out there opening the new refurbished Kingaroy Hospital.
Order. Member for Nanango.
This government delivering for Kingaroy, Mr.
You can thank us later.
Not the LNP, this government.
Member for Nanango will cease her interjections. Premier, you have the call.
Our other priorities include funding. Other priorities include funding for Copper String, an 80% funding guarantee for infrastructure projects like the Bruce Highway, the Inland Freight Route and Logan to Gold Coast Faster Rail, $11 million in match funding for the Coomera Connector Future Stages business case, funding across the forward estimates for the NDIS. We'll pick up the phone to your federal K on a parts.
Give him a call.
Order! Order! Premier, would assist the House if you were to not direct your comments at other members directly. You have the call.
Thank you. A commitment to develop a national plan for women's economic security. Funding to extend the national partnerships on family, domestic and sexual violence. More funding to support the National Skills Agreement. Real dollars to address housing affordability. A commitment to jointly fund projects under Queensland's nation-leading renewable energy and hydrogen jobs initiative. This is what Queensland needs in tonight's budget. Mr Speaker, Queensland does more than its fair share. When the federal government turned its back on us, we funded Cross River Rail on our own to the tune of $5.4 billion, with a detailed business case. That far-sighted decision helped us to win the Olympics by demonstrating an integrated transport system already under construction. Each year, our state generates 18.2% of Australia's gross domestic product. Queensland doesn't just want its fair share, Mr Speaker. Queensland deserves our fair share. Billions announced this week include projects for which there is no business case. Bitter experience teaches us that the federal government can announce funding that won't be delivered until the budget, after the budget, after the budget, after the next budget. Queensland deserves its fair share now, and I will always fight for Queensland's fair share. Mr Speaker, in 3,769 days, Queensland will host the opening ceremony of the 2032 Olympic Games. It will be followed by the Paralympic Games. These will be the biggest single transformational events in our state ever. Just last week, I signed an agreement with the federal and local governments on a city deal triggering $1.8 billion worth of investment in key infrastructure across the south-east. Mr Speaker, it is important to emphasise none of it is built for the Games. It is built in time for them. 2032 is a deadline all levels of government are working towards, moving projects off the drawing board and into our lives sooner. Mr Speaker, it's estimated winning the Games will generate more than $8 billion in social and economic benefits for Queensland. Mapping the next 10 years, while exciting, will not be easy. The 22 members of the organising committee for the Olympic Games Board have a big job ahead of them. That is why I'm pleased to announce my nominees of Natalie Cook and Patrick Johnson. Nat and Pat are Queenslanders to the core, having born and lived some of their life in regional Queensland. Nat won gold in beach volleyball at Sydney Olympics. Patrick holds the record as the fastest man to run the 100-metre sprint. Both were born in North Queensland. Both were recommended as part of a worldwide search. They joined myself and the Deputy Premier on the board to ensure the commitments I made to the IOC are delivered. Mr Speaker, 5 more directors will be selected from that worldwide search, and they will be agreed to by myself and the Prime Minister. The first meeting of the board will be held next month in April. And, Mr Speaker, as part of the powerful Legacy Committee, which will draw from people right across Queensland, I have nominated that the Minister for Sport, Minister Hinchcliffe, will chair this very important body that will see some of the best and brightest in our state, Mr Speaker, on that board. Mr Speaker, these nominations—
Member for Kawana, you may find your interjections entertaining. I'm not. Premier, you have the call.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, these nominations bring us that much closer to the opening ceremony and a Games that all of Queensland can be proud of. Mr Speaker, from West Brisbane to Wimbledon, from Richlands to Roland Garros, from Ipswich to the Australian Open, 3 times Ash Barty has held up a Grand Slam trophy, 15 times a championship winner in singles, and one of only 5 women to have been world #1 3 years in a row. Through all of it, Ash's demeanour, her perspective on victory and fame, has been perhaps her greatest attribute of all. We always applaud our homegrown successes. It's even better we can admire them. With Ash Barty, we can do both. And the fact that she doesn't seek our esteem demonstrates her level-headed approach. She modestly deflects our tributes, but she is our reigning Queensland Sports Star of the Year, jointly with Emma McEwen. Little did we know on that night just 4 months ago that this chapter of Ash's life was changing. It's her career, it's her decision, it's her timing on her terms. Today, as we mark her retirement from tennis, we thank her for the quality of her play, for the enjoyment she brought to fans of the game, and for her behaviour on and off the court, which impressed her competitors and inspired young girls and boys picking up rackets for the very first time. Yeah. We thank Ash's family, her parents Robert and Josie, who share the credit. We thank her coaches and her support team all throughout her career. And of course we especially mention Jimmy Joyce at the West Brisbane Richlands Tennis Centre, who first spotted her talent all those many, many years ago. Yeah. I'm proud to say in the electorate of Inala. Yeah. And we wish Ash Barty well for whatever comes next.
Yeah. I call the Deputy Premier Minister